In 1961, Michael Rockefeller, a 23-year-old American and the son of the most powerful families in the United States, traveled to one of the most remote and dangerous places on Earth, the Asmat region of West Indonesia. Unlike most people in his position, Michael wasn't interested in politics or business. He was obsessed with culture, exploration, and documenting tribes that had little to no contact with the outside world. The Asmat people in particular fascinated him. Their intricate wood carvings, spiritual rituals, and at the time a history of headhunting and ritual warfare. This wasn't a tourist destination, it was dense jungle, unpredictable rivers, and territory where outsiders were rare and often not welcomed. Before his disappearance, Michael had already spent weeks travelling through the region, visiting villages, collecting artifacts, and building connections with local tribes. Reports suggest he was calm, focused, and deeply passionate about what he was doing. He wasn't reckless, but he was determined, and that determination is what ultimately led him into a situation he couldn't escape. On November 18th, 1961, Michael set out on a journey along the southern coast with a Dutch man called Rini Wassing and their two local guides. They were travelling in a small, narrow wooden canal, and crucially, it was overloaded with supplies and equipment. As they moved through the open water, conditions began to change. The sea became rougher, waves grew stronger, and eventually the canal was hit and capsized, throwing everyone into the water miles away from shore. At first, there was still hope. The two local guides, believing they could reach land, made the decision to swim for help. That left Michael and Wassing alone, clinging to the overturned canal in open ocean. They were also surrounded by the strong currents that were still there with no clear sign of rescue. Hours passed and the sun began to set. The situation grew more desperate by the minute. Eventually, Michael made a decision that would define the entire mystery. Looking toward the distant shoreline, he turned to Wassing and said, "I think I can make it." Using empty fuel cans tied together for buoyancy, Michael slipped into the water and began swimming towards the land. And also, he was swimming alone. That was the last ever confirmed moment anyone ever saw him alive. Wassing stayed behind, eventually being rescued the next day, but Michael Rockefeller was completely gone. What followed next was a massive search effort by authorities, launching boats and aerial searches. Local villagers were questioned, missionaries were asked to help gather information. Given who Michael was, this event wasn't a small operation, it had international attention. But despite all of this, no trace of him was ever found. No body, no clothing, no equipment, absolutely nothing. The official conclusion was that he drowned, either from exhaustion or strong currents or possibly even shark attacks. And on the surface, the explanation makes sense. He was miles from shore, in dangerous waters, already exhausted. But that's where the story should have ended, except it didn't. Over time, reports began to emerge that completely changed the tone of the case. Missionaries and local sources claim that Michael may have actually made it to the shore. According to some accounts, he was even seen by members of the Asmat tribe. And what's even more unsettling is what those reports suggested happened next. Some testimonies claim that he was killed not randomly but as part of a ritual act, possibly linked to revenge. At the same time, there had been violent encounters between Dutch forces and the Asmat people, including incidents where tribe members were killed. In certain interpretations of Asmat culture, acts of violence were sometimes tied to ritual balance or revenge cycles. The idea is that Michael, as an outsider, may have been connected to some of these earlier events. But it doesn't stop there. There are also some claims that are far less confirmed but deeply unsettling, seen alive in villages located miles inland from where he disappeared. If those accounts are even partially true, it suggests something almost impossible. That after hours in the ocean, exhausted and alone, he not only reached land, but travelled deep in one of the most unforgiving jungle environments in Earth. No gear, no food, no map, completely cut off from the outside world altogether. How could he possibly come from on the sea, reach land, and then go through the wilderness. That's one of these like vast wildernesses that are absolutely impossible to keep track of where you've been and where you're going. And if he did make it that far, then his final moments didn't happen at the sea. They happened somewhere in the jungle. To this day, no physical evidence has ever been recovered to confirm what truly happened. The Dutch government files, witnesses and testimonies, and later investigations all point in different directions, but none give a definitive answer. Some researchers strongly believe he drowned, others are convinced he reached land and was killed, and then there are those who believe the truth is somewhere in between, that he survived longer than anyone expected, but not long enough to escape what came next. What makes this case so disturbing is the uncertainty. It's not just a disappearance, it's a story that leaves you imagining the possibilities. The moment he decided to swim, the silence after he vanished, and the idea that somewhere far from where anyone expected, his story may have continued, unseen and undocumented. Because if Michael Rockefeller did make it to the shore, then the ocean wasn't what took him. It was whatever was waiting on the other side. And if you did enjoy this content of this story, brand new story, it is so bizarre how he disappeared and like what happened. Was it the tribe? Was it the forest? Or did he drown? But if you did like today's content, make sure to like and subscribe and comment on which case you would like me to do next. But other than that, I will see you on the next one.